The first thing I noticed was the quiet. Not the peaceful kind, the kind you expect at a lake house in October, with the leaves turning and the water lapping against the dock. This was the heavy, suffocating quiet of a poverty that never happened, the kind that settles into the corners and makes the empty chairs look like accusations. I had spent 3 hours arranging the flowers on the picnic table. White daisies and yellow mums, because Mom always said yellow was cheerful, and I wanted her to feel cheerful when she arrived. I had defrosted the lasagna, the one with the extra cheese that David used to love, and I had bought a cake from the bakery in town, the one with the buttercream frosting that cost $37 Rs. I had even ironed the tablecloth, a blue and white checkered thing I had found at a thrift store, because I wanted everything to look perfect. I stood at the sliding glass door at 4:30 in the afternoon, watching the driveway. The gravel was still wet from the morning rain, and there were no tire tracks. Not one. The driveway curved through a stand of pine trees, and I had positioned myself so I could see the first glimpse of a car approaching. But the road beyond the trees was empty, and the only sound was the wind rattling the screen door I had sent the invitations 6 weeks ago. The paper ones with the little sailboats on them, because I thought it would be a nice touch, something that said I had put thought into it. I had licked all the envelopes myself and walked them to the post office, and I had called everyone the week before to confirm. Rachel said she was bringing potato salad, the kind with the bacon bits and the sour cream dressing, and she promised she would be there by 5. Mark said he would come late because of Jacob's soccer game, but he would definitely make it, no question. Mom said Dad's back was acting up again, but they would try their best, and I knew what that meant, but I pushed the thought away. David, my ex-husband, said he would drop by for an hour, for old time's sake, and I had almost believed him. At 5 o'clock, I opened a bottle of wine. I poured myself a glass and sat at the picnic table, looking at the spread I had laid out. The lasagna was in a ceramic dish, covered in foil to keep it warm. The salad was in a wooden bowl, the dressing on the side. The bread was in a basket with a cloth napkin over it. Everything was ready. Everything except the guests. I checked my phone. No messages. No missed calls. I scrolled through my contacts, thinking about calling someone, but I didn't want to seem desperate. I had already done the confirming. I had already done the reminding. I was not going to do the begging. At 6, I ate a piece of the cake. Standing over the kitchen sink, so I wouldn't have to look at the empty table. The buttercream was too sweet, and it stuck to the roof of my mouth. I chewed slowly, mechanically, and washed it down with another glass of wine. The candles were still in the box on the counter, unlit. I had bought 31 of them, one for each jar, but I had only put 20 on the cake because I didn't want to seem like I was making a big deal out of turning 31. My mother always said that a woman over 30 should not draw attention to herself, and I had internalized that lesson so thoroughly that I was still following it at 31. At 7, I sta root calling. Rachel's phone went straight to voicemail. I left a message, trying to keep my voice light. Hey, it's me. The lasagna is getting cold, but no rush. Drive safe. I hung up and called Mark. He answered on the third ring, but there was noise in the background, a television or maybe a video game. I'm not going to make it, sis, he said. Jacob has a fever. You know how it is. I asked if he needed me to bring anything, medicine or soup, because even though I was disappointed, I was still his sister, and I still see a red. No, we're fine, he said. Happy birthday, though. I'll call you tomorrow. He never called. Mom called at 8:30. I saw her name on the screen and my heart lifted for a moment. Maybe they were on their way. Maybe Dad's back had improved. Maybe they had been running late, and now they were calling to tell me they were almost there. But her voice on the other end was apologetic, which I should have recognized as a warning sign. Honey, I am so sorry, she said. Your father's sciatica is acting up something fierce. We were just about to get in the car, but he can be a rely stand. I told her it was fine, that I understood. I always understood. I had been understanding my whole life. We'll make it up to you, she said. Next weekend, maybe. We can do a little dinner at the house. I said that sounded nice, even though I knew it would never happen. It would never happen because there was always something. AFLA re-up. A deadline. A forgotten commitment. I was always the one who got postponed. I blew out the candles alone at 9 o'clock. I had put 20 of them on the cake, but I lit 31, one for every year, and one for every lie I had told myself about how much my family loved me. I blew them out in one breath, and I watched the smoke curl up toward the ceiling, and I wished for something I couldn't name. Maybe I wished for a different family. Maybe I wished for a different life. Maybe I just wished for the lasagna to stop smelling so good, because eating it alone would be too sad. I didn't eat the lasagna. I wrapped it in foil and put it in the refrigerator, and I poured myself another glass of wine, and I sat on the couch in the living room, staring at the dark lake through the window. The moon was rising over the water, a thin sliver of silver that cast a faint glow on the ripples. It was beautiful, and I hated it. I hated the beauty because it felt like a mockery. 2 days later, I was back at my apartment in the city. I had returned the lake house key to the rental office, and I had driven home with the leftover lasagna and a clur in the back seat. I had thrown away the flowers, which had already root to wilt, and I had put the cake in the trash, because I couldn't bear to look at it anymore. I was trying to forget the whole thing, trying to convince myself that it didn't matter, that birthdays were just another day, that I was being too sensitive. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. The empty chairs. The uneaten food. The silence. I kept replaying it in my head, looking for signs I had missed, searching for explanations that would make it hurt less. There were no explanations. There was only the truth, and the truth was that my family had chosen not to come. I was scrolling through my phone on the couch, half watching a show about home renovations, when I saw Rachel's post. It was a picture of a lake, a different lake, 2 hours north of the one I had rented. There was a dock and a rowboat and a fire pit with logs stacked neatly beside it. The water was the same shade of gray-blue as the one I had read it for 2 days. The trees were the same pine and birch. But there were people in this picture. I could see the silhouette of a figure standing at the edge of the dock, and another figure sitting in the rowboat, and a third figure tending the fire. The caption read, "Family Weekend Vibes," with a little sun emoji and a heart. My sister's standard way of announcing a good time, complete with the filters and the hashtags that made everything look more idyllic than it really was. I recognized the red clur in the corner of the photo. It was the one Mom had bought at a garage sale 10 years ago, with the scratched lid and the dented handle. I recognized Mark's flannel shirt, hanging on a branch in the background, the one with the frayed cuffs that he refused to throw away. I recognized my father's orthopedic sandals, resting on the edge of the dock, the ones he complained about every summer but never replaced. I zoomed in on the reflection in the water and saw my mother's silhouette, her arm around someone whose face was hidden but whose build was unmistakably Rachel. I sat on the couch in my living room for an hour, staring at the picture. I felt something move inside me, something cold and sharp that I had been pushing down for years. It was the same feeling I had when I was 12 and I came home from school to find my room emptied out because my parents had decided to redecorate without telling me. It was the same feeling I had when I was 19 and I found out my college fund had been used to pay for MARKCAR. It was the same feeling I had when I was 26 and I realized that David was never going to love me the way I loved him, because I was too much, too loud, too present, and he needed someone who would fade into the background. I didn't say a word. I didn't comment on the post. I didn't call Rachel to ask why. I didn't text Mom to ask for an explanation. I just sat there, feeling the cold thing spread through my chest like ice water, numbing the party of me that still hoped, still believed, still wanted to be party of a family that didn't want me. And then I got up. I walked to my desk, and I opened my laptop. I opened the banking app, and I looked at the accounts. The mortgage was in my name. I had co-signed it 3 years ago, when Mom and Dad were about to lose the house. The realtor had called them, and they had called me, and I had driven over to the bank that same afternoon to sign the papers. I had taken out a personal loan to cover the back payments, and I had been making the monthly installments ever since. It was almost $400 a month, money I didn't always have, but I never missed a payment. The truck lease was in my name, too. Dad had said it was just a formality. His credit was bad, and the dealer wouldn't approve him on his own. It would be a favor, he said. He would pay me back every month, he said. He had paid me back exactly twice in the 2 years since I signed up. The business loan was the biggest one. Mark had wanted to start a landscaping company, and I had co-signed a $30,000 note. He had shown me a business plan, and it had looked solid, and he had promised to make me a partner. He had promised he would never let me down. I had believed him because he was my brother, and I wanted to believe in him. I had been making the payments on that loan for 18 months now, watching the principal barely shrink while the interest piled up. I had never missed a payment. Not once. I had worked double shifts at the clinic, picking up weekend hours and evening hours, so I could afford my own rent and still cover everyone else's debts. I had given up vacations, new clothes, the gym membership I didn't have time to use anyway. I had told myself it was what family did. I had told myself that one day, they would notice. One day, they would appreciate it. That day was never going to come. I looked at the balance in my savings account. It wasn't much, just a few $1,000s, but it was mine. I transferred the mortgage payment to my savings account. I canceled the autopay on the truck lease. I flagged the business loan account and marked it for non-renewal. It took less than 5 minutes. 5 minutes to undo years of obligation. That night, my phone buzzed. It was Mom. Did something happen? She texted. I called the bank and they said the payment didn't go through. Just a glitch, right? I read at the screen for a long time. I thought about the empty lake house and the candles I had blown out alone. I thought about the picture on Rachel's social media and the red claw and the rowboat and the fire pit. I thought about every birthday and every holiday and every time I had been forgotten or overlooked or told that I was being too sensitive. I typed back, yeah, I finally took the hint. I put the phone down and went to bed. I slept better than I had in weeks. The next morning, I woke up with the sun streaming through the window, and I lay there for a moment, feeling the unfamiliar lightness in my chest. The cold thing was still there, but it had softened, like ice that had root to melt. I knew there would be consequences. I knew there would be phone calls and guilt trips and accusations. But for the first time in my life, I didn't see a re. I had drawn a line, and I was going to hold it. I got up, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table. I looked out the window at the city skyline, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt free. I woke up to 27 missed calls and 43 text messages. It was like the floodgates had opened, and every person in my family had decided to unleash their fury into my phone while I was sleeping. Mom had called 8 times. Dad had called 5. Rachel had called 6. Mark had called 4. And there were messages from people I barely knew, cousins and aunts and old family friends who had somehow gotten wind of the situation and felt the need to weigh in. I ignored all of them. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, watching the sun rise over the buildings across the street. The sky was a pale pink, streaked with clouds that looked like cotton candy, and the city was just rooting to wake up. A beige truck rumbled down the alley below my window, and somewhere a dog was barking, and life was going on as if nothing had changed. I felt lighter than I had in a long time. It wasn't happiness, exactly. It was more like the absence of weight, as if a backpack full of stones had been lifted off my shoulders. I had been carrying that backpack for so long that I had forgotten what it felt like to walk without it. Now I felt almost unsteady, like I might float away. My phone buzzed again. Rachel. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message that lasted almost 2 minutes. I didn't listen to it. I could guess what it said. How could you do this to them? Do you know what this is going to do to Mom? You're so selfish. You've always been so selfish. I thought about the irony. I had spent my entire life trying not to be selfish. I had given and given and given, and now that I was finally stopping, I was the villain. It was the same story I had heard my whole life. I was too much, or I was not enough, or I was doing it wrong. There was never a version of me that was just right. At 9 o'clock, there was a knock on my door. I knew it was Mom before I even looked through the peephole. She was wearing her good coat, the beige one with the gold buttons, and her face was flushed from the cold. She had driven all the way across the city. She had never done that before, not for me. She had always expected me to come to her. I opened the door. She didn't say hello. She walked past me into the apartment like she owned the place, which she never had, which she had never paid a dime for. What is this nonsense? She said. The bank called me again this morning. They said you're not going to make the payment. They said you're planning to let it default. Good morning to you too. I said. Don't you get smart with me, she said. She was standing in the middle of my living room, her hands on her hips, her chin raised. It was the same posture she had used when I was a teenager, and she was about to ground me for coming home late. I am your mother. You owe me an explanation. I closed the door and walked to the kitchen. I picked up my coffee cup and took a sip. I don't owe you anything, Mom. Excuse me, I co-signed the mortgage to help you, I said. I co-signed the truck lease and the business loan because I believed in you and Dad and Mark. I believed that you would do the right thing. And what did you do? You forgot my birthday. You forgot me. Your father has sciatica, Dad has always had sciatica, I interrupted. He's had it since I was 10. It's never stopped him from going fishing or taking a trip to the lake with Rachel. Mom's face went pale. I saw the recognition in her eyes. She knew I had seen the post. She opened her mouth to say something, then closed it again. She was trying to come up with an excuse, a justification, some way to turn this back on me. I saw the picture, I said. Rachel posted it. You were all there, having a wonderful time, while I was sitting alone in a lake house I rented for my own birthday. I made lasagna. I bought a cake. I waited for hours. We were going to come, she said. Her voice was weaker now, the sharpness fading into something more defensive. The plan was to come on Sunday. You didn't realize what, that I was alone, that I was sitting there like an idiot, waiting for people who were never going to show up. Mom walked to the couch and sat down. She looked smaller than I remembered. Older. The lines on her face seemed deeper in the morning light, and her hands were shaking slightly as she folded them in her lap. I didn't think it was a big deal, she said. It's just a birthday. You're a grown woman. Grown women don't make such a fuss over birthdays. It's not about the birthday, I said. It's about the fact that no one in this family sees me. No one notices me unless they need something. And I am done being the one who gives. She was quiet for a long time. I could see her processing, trying to find a way to turn this back on me. It was what she always did. She would say something about how I was being dramatic or how I was holding a grudge or how family was supposed to forgive each other. I had heard all of it before, and I was tired of it. I am not going to argue with you, she finally said. We need you to make the payment. The bank called. I know what the bank called. You're going to lose the house. Your father's truck. Your brother's business. Mark's business failed 6 months ago, I said. He just didn't tell anyone. I found out from a vendor who called me looking for payment. He's been driving the truck around, but he hasn't made a single sale in months. She read at me. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. That's not true. It is true, I said. I didn't tell you because I was trying to protect him. But I'm not protecting anyone anymore. You need to know the truth. Mom was crying now. I had never seen her cry before, not in front of me. She had always been the stoic one, the one who held everything together while Dad shouted and Rachel sulked and Mark made excuses. She had always been the one who told me to be strong, to be a good sport, to not make waves. Now she was sitting on my couch, tears streaming down her cheeks, and I didn't know what to do with it. I don't understand, she said. Why are you doing this to us? I knelt in front of her. I took her hands. They were cold and bony and familiar, the same hands that had held mine when I was little and read. I am not doing anything to you, I said. I am just stopping doing everything for you. There is a difference. And if you want to be angry at someone, be angry at Rachel and Mark and Dad. They had a Pa Rudy without me. They chose to be at a different lake. They made that decision, not me. She pulled her hands away. What am I supposed to tell your father? Tell him the truth, I said. Tell him that I can't afford to keep paying for things that aren't mine. Tell him that I'm tired of being used. Tell him that if he wants to keep his truck, he can find a way to make the payments himself. She stood up. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, ring her mascara into dark streaks on her cheeks. I have never been so ashamed of you, she said. That's okay, I said. I've been ashamed of all of you for a long time. So I guess we're even. She walked to the door. She didn't look back. She opened it and left, and I heard her footsteps hurry down the hallway toward the elevator. I sat on the couch where she had been sitting and finished my coffee. It was cold. I didn't see 2 hours later, Rachel showed up. She didn't knock either. She had her own key, the one I had given her years ago in case of emergencies. She had never used it before. I heard her in the hallway, fumbling with the lock, and then the door swung open. Are you crazy? She said. You made Mom cry. Do you understand that she never cries? She cried in front of me, I said. I think that's a first. Rachel dropped her purse on the floor. She was wearing the same flannel shirt from the picture, the one that had been hanging on the branch. She was flushed and angry, and there was a smear of lipstick on her teeth from where she had been chewing her lips. What is wrong with you? What did we ever do to make you so vindictive? You can take that key off your ring, I said. I want it back. She ignored me. She walked into the kitchen and root opening cabinets, looking for something. A glass, maybe. Something to throw. You're making a huge mistake, she said. You're going to destroy this family. I didn't destroy anything, I said. You did. You and Mark and Mom and Dad. You made a choice. You chose to spend my birthday without me. You chose to lie about it. And now you're upset because there are consequences. The consequences are that mom and dad might lose their house, she said. Do you even see about that mom and dad made their own choices, I said. They've been making bad choices for years. And I've been cleaning up the mess. It's not fair, and I'm done with it. She found a glass and filled it with water from the tap. She took a sip and set it down on the counter. I am not going to argue with you. You can be angry at me. You can hate me if you want. But you cannot do this to Mom. She's sick. I felt my heart skip. What, she has a condition, Rachel said. I wasn't supposed to tell you, but she's been having some issues with her heart. The doctor said she needs to reduce stress. This is going to kill her. I read at her. I thought about all the times Mom had complained about her chest or her breathing or her blood pressure. I thought about how she always brushed it off, saying it was nothing, saying she didn't want to be a burden. I had never asked more questions. I had never pushed. Tell her I love her, I said. Tell her I'm not doing this to hurt her. I'm doing this to save myself. Save yourself from what Rachel asked. From becoming her, I said. From spending my whole life taking care of everyone else and getting nothing in return. From waking up one day and realizing that I wasted my entire life on people who don't care about me. Rachel picked up her glass and threw it at the wall. It shattered into 100 pieces, and water dripped down the wallpaper in long, ugly streaks. I hate you, she said. That's fine, I said. I can live with that. She left without saying another word. I got the broom and swept up the glass. I thought about calling Mom, but I knew she wouldn't answer. I thought about calling Dad, but I knew he would yell. I thought about calling David, but I knew he would tell me I was overreacting. So I didn't call anyone. I swept up the glass and threw it in the trash. And then I made myself a sandwich and ate it standing at the kitchen counter, looking out the window at the city skyline. The sky was clear and blue. It was the kind of day that should have felt hopeful. But I felt something else. I felt a kind of emptiness that was new and strange and maybe even a little bit welcomed. I had no one to take care of me. And that meant I didn't have to take care of anyone else. That evening, I sat down with a notebook and a pen. I wrote down every loan I had co-signed, every payment I had made, every promise that had been broken. I wrote down the amounts and the dates and the names. I wrote down the lies I had been told and the excuses I had accepted. I wrote it all down because I wanted to see it in black and white, to make it real, to prove to myself that I wasn't imagining it. The list was longer than I expected. It filled 3 pages. I looked at it, and I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. This was the evidence. This was the proof that I had been used, that I had been taken advantage of, that I had been a fool. But I also felt something else. I felt a flicker of pride. Because I was finally doing something about it. I was finally putting myself first. I tore the pages out of the notebook and folded them into an envelope. I wrote my parents' address on the front and stamped it. I would mail it tomorrow. I wanted them to see the list, to see the numbers, to understand what they had done. I went to bed early that night. I slept soundly, without dreams. And when I woke up the next morning, I felt ready to face whatever came next. 3 days passed in silence. I didn't hear from anyone. My mother didn't call, my father didn't text, Rachel didn't send another angry message, and Mark, predictably, stayed completely invisible. The quiet was louder than the noise had been. Every time my phone buzzed, I flinched, expecting another wave of accusations, but it was always a work email or a notification from an app 1BA Rely used. My family had decided to freeze me out. I knew it was a tactic. It was the same one they used when I was a teenager and they wanted to punish me for something. They would go quiet and wait for me to come crawling back, to apologize, to beg for forgiveness. I had always done it. I had always been the one to break first, because I couldn't stand the silence, couldn't stand the thought of being cut off from them. This time, I didn't. I went to work. I showed up at the clinic every morning and did my job. I processed insurance claims and answered phone calls and listened to patients complain about their health. I went home in the evenings and watched television and ate dinner alone. I didn't call anyone. I didn't apologize. I didn't send a follow-up text to explain myself. I had said what I needed to say, and I was going to let it stand. On the fourth day, I got a text from Mark. It was the first time he had ever initiated contact with me that wasn't about money or a favor. "We need to talk," it said. "Can you come to Mom's house?" I read at the screen for a long time. I knew it was a trap. I knew they would all be there, ready to gang up on me, ready to guilt me into backing down. I knew I should say no. But I had been waiting for this. I had been waiting for them to come to me, to admit that they needed me. And so I said yes. I drove to Mom's house that evening. It was the same house I had grown up in, the split level with the brown siding and the crabapple tree in the front yard. The tree was bare now, stripped of leaves and fruit. It looked as sad as I felt. I parked on the street and walked up the driveway, my footsteps crunching on the gravel. I could hear voices inside. Rachel's laugh, sharp and brittle. Mark's deep voice, rumbling like distant thunder. Dad's occasional cough, a wet, phlegmy sound that I had heard my whole life. I walked in without knocking, and they all looked up at me like I was a stranger. Mom was sitting on the couch, wrapped in a blanket. Rachel was in the armchair, her legs crossed, her arms folded. Mark was standing by the fireplace, one hand resting on the mantel. Dad was at the dining room table, pretending to read a newspaper. The only person missing was David, but David had never really been part of the family anyway. He had always hovered at the edges, an outsider looking in, and now he was gone entirely. "Hello," I said. I stood in the middle of the living room, my coat still on, my keys in my hand. I wasn't going to sit down until I knew what this was about. "Have a seat," Mark said. He gestured to the other armchair, the one that had been my grandmother's, with the floral upholstery and the worn armrests. I sat down. "We need to talk about your decision," Mark said. He was using his serious voice, the one he used when he wanted to sound like the man of the family. It was a really nasty thing to do, and we're all very upset about it. "Tell me something I don't know," I said. "We're not trying to attack you," Rachel said. She had a softer tone now, the tone she used when she wanted something, when she was trying to manipulate someone into doing her bidding. "We just want to understand." "I told you what I wanted," I said. I wanted to be seen. I wanted to be valued. I wanted to have a birthday that wasn't an afterthought. "You have every right to be angry," Dad said. He hadn't looked up from the newspaper. "We made a mistake. We should have come to your Pa Rudy. But that doesn't justify what you're doing now." "It wasn't just a mistake," I said. "It was a pattern. A pattern of being forgotten. A pattern of being ignored. A pattern of being treated like a resource instead of a person." "No one treats you like a resource," Mom said. Her voice was thin and reedy, like the voice of someone who had been crying for days. "You're our daughter." "I'm your backup plan," I said. "I'm the one who pays the bills when everyone else runs out of money. I'm the one who co-signs the loans. I'm the one who drops everything to help out. But when do you ever help me? When do you ever show up for me?" There was a long silence. I could see Mark exchanging a glance with Rachel. I could see Mom looking down at her hands, her fingers twisting the edge of the blanket. I could see Dad folding his newspaper, slowly and deliberately, like he was buying time. Fine, Mark said. You're right. We haven't always been there for you. But that's not a reason to destroy us. I am not destroying anyone, I said. I am just stopping the cycle. I am not going to keep doing everything for people who don't appreciate it. If you want to keep the house and the truck and the business, you'll have to figure it out on your own. Mom sta root crying again. It was a quiet, steady cry, the kind that made me feel like a monster. I wanted to go to her. I wanted to hold her and tell her I was sorry. But I didn't. I couldn't. I had spent too many years apologizing for things that weren't my fault. Please, she said. Please don't do this. I need you. We need you. You need me when you need something, I said. But you don't actually see about me. You see about what I can do for you. That's not true, Rachel said. That's not true at all. Then prove it, I said. Tell me one thing you've done for me in the past year that wasn't a favor or a loan or a transaction. She opened her mouth to answer, but no words came out. I saw her face flush with anger, but she couldn't find the lie fast enough. I saw Mark shift uncomfortably, his hands moving from the mantel to his pockets. Dad dropped the newspaper on the table, the pages scattering like leaves. That's what I thought, I said. I stood up to leave. I had said what I needed to say, and I didn't want to sit there any longer, watching them scramble for excuses. But Dad raised his hand, a slow, deliberate gesture, and told me to sit down. He had a look on his face that I hadn't seen in years. A serious look, a weighty look, the look he used when he was about to deliver bad news. There's something you don't know, he said. Something we've been keeping from you. I sat down. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach, a familiar dread that I had felt many times before. This was always how it sta root. First the accusation, then the denial, then the revelation. I had been through this cycle so many times that I could predict the steps. Your mother and I haven't been paying the mortgage for a long time, he said. Not since last winter. The bank gave us a notice of foreclosure 6 months ago. We've been using your payments to cover the interest, but the principal is still in default. The house is going to be auctioned off at the end of the year. I felt the air leave my lungs. The words hit me like a physical blow, and I had to steady myself against the armrest. What we didn't want to tell you, Mom said. We thought we could figure it out. But the money you were sending, it was only a small part of what we needed. We were hoping we could refinance. But we couldn't qualify on our own. The payments were supposed to be for the mortgage, I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, distant and hollow. The payments I was making were supposed to be paying off the debt. They were, Dad said. But there was more debt than you knew about. Credit cards, medical bills. We kept taking out loans to cover the loans. It's a mess. I felt like I was spinning. Like I was falling through a trapdoor into a dark, bottomless pit. All those years of sacrifice, all those late nights and skipped vacations and empty bank accounts. And none of it had made a difference. None of it had been enough. I didn't buy the truck, Mark said. He was speaking quietly now, his voice rely above a whisper. That loan was for the landscaping business, but the business didn't fail 6 months ago. It failed 2 years ago. I've been using the money to pay for my own bills, to keep up appearances. I know it was wrong. I know I should have told you. I looked at Rachel. And I don't have any secrets, she said. I'm just the sister who was at the lake. But you knew, I said. You knew about the foreclosure. You knew about the loan. You knew everything, and you didn't tell me. Mark told me last spring, she said. But he said you'd make a big deal about it. He said you'd pull out and leave us all in the lurch. I had a right to know, I said. I had a right to know what I was signing. What I was paying for. We were trying to protect you, Mom said. We didn't want you to worry. We wanted to find a solution on our own. And what was the solution, I asked. Was the solution to let me keep paying for a house that was never going to be paid off? Was the solution to keep me in the dark while you all went to a lake and had a party? We made mistakes, Dad said. We're not perfect. But we're family. And family forgives. I stood up. I didn't want to sit there anymore. I didn't want to see their faces, the mix of guilt and defensiveness and self-pity. I walked to the front door and opened it. The cold air hit my face. Sharp and clean. Where are you going? Rachel asked. Home, I said. I'm going home. Please don't leave like this, Mom said. We can talk this through. I can't do this right now, I said. I need to think. I walked to my car. I got in and closed the door. I sat there for a long time, ring at the dashboard, not knowing what to do next. The engine was cold, and the windows were rooting to fog up with my breath. I could see the lights in the house flickering through the trees, and I knew they were still inside, still talking about me, still trying to figure out how to fix the mess they had made. And then I root the engine and drove away. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see the house anymore, didn't want to see the crabapple tree or the brown siding or the porch light that had been broken for 10 years. I just wanted to get away, to put as much distance between me and them as possible. I drove through the neighborhood, past the familiar streets and the familiar houses. I drove past the park where I used to play, past the school where I used to learn, past the diner where I used to eat pancakes with my grandmother. Everything looked the same, but everything felt different. I pulled over at a gas station and sat in the parking lot. I put my head on the steering wheel and tried to breathe. The weight of everything they had told me was crushing my chest, pressing down on me like a physical force. I had been paying for a house that was already lost. I had been supporting a business that never existed. I had been lied to by everyone I trusted. And the worst part was that they didn't even think they had done anything wrong. They thought they were protecting me. They thought they were doing the right thing. They had convinced themselves that their lies were acts of love. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break something. I wanted to drive back to that house and tell them exactly what I thought of them. But I knew it wouldn't change anything. They would never see it my way. They would never admit that they had used me. I drove home and went to bed. I didn't sleep. I just lay there, ring at the ceiling, replaying every word they had said. The foreclosure. The failed business. The lies. The secrets. And I root to make a plan. I had to pull over twice on the drive home. The first time, I parked in a gas station lot and put my head on the steering wheel. I tried to breathe slowly, counting each inhale and exhale, but the weight of everything they had told me was crushing my chest. The house was going to be auctioned. The payments I had made for years had never been enough. Mark had been lying to me for 2 years. Rachel had known everything and done nothing. My parents had been hiding a foreclosure while I scraped together money I didn't have. The second time, I stopped at a diner on the outskirts of the city. It was one of those old-fashioned places with red vinyl booths and a jukebox that hadn't been updated since the 80s. I ordered coffee, but I didn't drink it. I just sat there, watching the waitress refill the salt shakers, trying to find some sense of normalcy in the mundane. I wanted to call someone. I wanted to tell someone what had happened. But the only person I would have called was David, and he was no longer my person. He had made that clear when he walked out the door 18 months ago, saying he needed space, saying I was too tangled up in my family's problems to have a real relationship. I got home late. The appartement was cold and dark. I turned on the lights and stood in the middle of the living room, feeling like a ghost in my own life. I had spent so many years trying to keep my family afloat. I had given them money and time and energy. I had sacrificed so much of myself, and for what? For a house that was going to be lost anyway. For a brother who had lied to me. For a sister who had watched it all happen. For parents who had kept secrets that made everything I did meaningless. I went to bed. I didn't sleep. I lay there in the dark, ring at the ceiling, replaying every word they had said. The foreclosure notice. The failed business. The hidden debts. The lies that had been wrapped in the language of protection. They had told themselves they were shielding me from worry, but they were really shielding themselves from my anger. They knew I would have been furious if I had known the truth. And they were right. The next morning, I woke up with a clear head. The anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface, but it had been joined by something else. A determination. A resolve. I couldn't keep going in circles with my family. I needed to understand the full picture, not just the pieces they had given me. I needed to see the documents. I needed to know exactly what I had signed and what it all meant. If I was going to make decisions, I needed to make them with my eyes open. I called the bank. I asked for copies of the loan agreements. I asked for a full accounting of the mortgage and the truck lease and the business loan. The woman on the phone was polite but curt. She told me it would take a few days to gather everything. I said I would wait. I had waited this long. I could wait a little longer. I called a lawyer. Not the fancy kind, the kind who advertised on billboards with slogans about fighting for justice. I called a real one, a woman who handled family law and contract disputes. Her name was Susan, and she had an office in a strip mall near my apartment, sandwiched between a dry cleaner and a Chinese restaurant. I told her everything. I laid out the loans, the co-signatures, the payments I had been making, the lies I had uncovered. She listened without interruption, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. When I was done, she leaned back in her chair and sighed. "This is a mess," she said. "But it's not as bad as it could be. The good news is that most of the loans are in your name, which means you have control over them. The bad news is that you're legally responsible for all of them." "I know," I said. "But I'm willing to walk away from them. I'm willing to take the hit to my credit if it means getting out." "That's a bold move," she said. "But it might be the right one. You've been running your family for years. It's time to put yourself first." I left her office with a folder full of paperwork and a sense of purpose. I was going to unravel this knot. I was going to understand every thread. I was going to know exactly how much I had been deceived, and then I was going to decide what to do about it. Over the next week, I did exactly that. I spent hours on the phone with the bank, with the credit union, with the collections agencies. I got copies of every agreement, every statement, every notice. I built a timeline on a large piece of butcher paper that I taped to my living room wall. I looked at the numbers. I added them up. And what I found made my stomach turn. The mortgage had been taken out 15 years ago, when my parents bought the house. The original amount was modest, $120,000. But over the years, they they had refinanced twice, each time adding more debt. They had taken out a second mortgage to pay for Mark's college, even though Mark had dropped out after 2 semesters and never paid them back. They had taken out a third mortgage to pay for Rachel's wedding, a wedding that had lasted less than a year before her husband ran off with a woman from his office. The truck lease was a different story. My father had signed a 5-year lease on a brand new pickup truck. He couldn't afford the payments on his own, so he had asked me to co-sign. But he had never told me that the lease was for a vehicle worth twice what he needed. He had never told me that he was making payments on a luxury truck while his house was falling apart. He had never told me that the truck was a status symbol, something he drove to show off to his friends, while I was eating ramen noodles to save money. And then there was the business loan. Mark had applied for $30,000 to start his landscaping company. He had shown me a business plan that looked solid, with projected revenues and equipment lists and market analysis. But the loan was disbursed directly to his personal account. He had never bought the equipment he promised. He had never registered the business. He had used the money to pay off his credit cards and take a vacation to Florida with his family. The landscaping company had never existed. It was a fiction, a story he told to get me to sign on the dotted line. I sat in my apartment with all this information spread out on the coffee table. The butcher paper on the wall was covered in dates and amounts and names. I looked at the numbers again. I added them up one more time, just to make sure I hadn't made a mistake. It came to just over $200,000. $200,000 of debt, most of it in my name, all of it accrued through lies and omissions and broken promises. I had been paying for a house that was already foreclosed. I had been paying for a truck that my father couldn't afford. I had been paying for a business that never existed. I was angry. I was more than angry. I was furious. I felt a rage building inside me, hot and bright, like a fire that had been smoldering for years and had finally found the oxygen to blaze. But I also felt something else. I felt relieved. Because now I knew the truth. I had the evidence. I could prove that I had been deceived. I called Susan, my lawyer. I told her everything I had found. She listened without interrupting, and when I was done, she told me I had a case. I could sue my family for fraud. I could pursue criminal charges. I could fight back in a way that would bring real consequences. I could make them pay for what they had done. But I knew I wouldn't do it. Not because I didn't want to, but because I knew that taking them to court would be another entanglement. Another endless, draining process that would keep me tethered to them for years. I would have to see them in depositions. I would have to relive every lie, every betrayal, every broken promise. I would have to become the person who destroyed her family in court. I want to sever the loans, I told Susan. I want to assign responsibility back to them. Whatever it takes, I want to be out. She said it would be difficult but possible. It would require a lot of paperwork and maybe a court order. I would have to prove that I had been misled, that I had signed under false pretenses. But I was willing to do the work. I was willing to spend the money and the time and the energy to free myself from them. That night, I wrote a letter to my parents and Mark and Rachel. I wrote it by hand, on paper, because I wanted them to see the effort I had put into it. I wanted them to know that I had found out everything. I wanted them to understand that I wasn't going to be manipulated anymore. I know about the refinances, I wrote. I know about the second mortgage and the third mortgage. I know about the truck. I know about the business loan. I know you all lied to me. I know you all took advantage of me. The letter was long. I described every lie, every omission, every moment of manipulation. I told them how I felt, how used and betrayed and abandoned I had been. I told them that I was done. I will not be paying your debts anymore. I will be taking legal steps to remove my name from all of these loans. It will take time, and it will be expensive, but I have nothing left to lose. I ended the letter with a simple sentence. You made your choices. Now I am making mine. I put the letter in an envelope. I addressed it to my parents' house. I stamped it and dropped it in the mailbox. And then I went to bed and cried. I cried for the years I had wasted. I cried for the money I would never get back. I cried for the family I had thought I had, the family I had tried so hard to keep together, the family that had never really existed. I cried until I had no tears left, and then I fell asleep. The next morning, I woke up feeling hollow. But the hollowness was better than the anger. It was a clean slate, a blank page. I had said what I needed to say. I had done what I needed to do. Whatever happened next, I would face it on my own terms. The response came 4 days later. I was at work, sitting at my desk in the clinic, processing a stack of insurance claims, when my phone buzzed with Rachel's name on the screen. I almost didn't answer. I had been ignoring their calls for days, letting every voicemail pile up without listening to a single one. But something made me pick up this time. Maybe it was the timing. Maybe it was the fact that Rachel had called 6 times in the past hour. Maybe it was the knot in my stomach that told me something was wrong. What do you want? I asked. My voice came out flat and tired. Mom is in the hospital, she said. She had a heart attack. I felt the world tilt. The stack of papers on my desk blurred in front of my eyes, and I had to lean against the desk to steady myself. My hand gripped the phone so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Is she okay? She's stable, Rachel said. But it was bad. The doctor said it was stress-related. She's been crying non-stop since she got your letter. I said nothing. I didn't know what to say. The words were stuck in my throat, tangled up with guilt and anger and fear. I had sent that letter knowing it would hurt them. I had wanted to hurt them. I had wanted them to feel even a fraction of the pain they had caused me. But I hadn't wanted this. I hadn't wanted my mother to end up in a hospital bed. Are you coming? Rachel asked. Her voice was sharp, accusatory. She was waiting for me to say no, to confirm her belief that I was selfish and heartless. I'll come, I said. But I need you to understand something. I am not coming to apologize. I am coming to see Mom. She didn't respond. She just hung up. I drove to the hospital in a daze. The streets were familiar, but they felt foreign, like I was seeing them for the first time. I parked in the garage and walked through the automatic doors into the main lobby. The smell of antiseptic and cafeteria food hit me like a wave, and I had to stop for a moment to catch my breath. I found the cardiac unit on the 3rd floor. The hallway was quiet, lined with doors that all looked the same. I walked slowly, reading the room numbers, until I found hers. Mom was in a private room, surrounded by beeping machines and fluorescent lights. Rachel was sitting in a chair by the window, her arms crossed, her face pale. Mark was standing in the corner, his hands in his pockets, sta ring at the floor. Dad was pacing in the hallway, his footsteps echoing on the linoleum. Mom looked smaller than I remembered. Her face was pale and her eyes were closed. An oxygen tube was taped to her nose, and N4 dripped into her arm. She looked fragile, breakable, like a porcelain doll that had been dropped and cracked. I felt a surge of sadness and anger and guilt all tangled together, a knot in my chest that I couldn't untie. Mom, I said. I walked to her bedside and took her hand. It was cold and thin, the skin papery and translucent. I'm here. She opened her eyes. They were watery and red, and for a moment, I saw something flicker in them. Recognition. Relief. And then the TRSSTA route to spill down her cheeks. You came, she said. Her voice was weak, ba rely above a whisper. Of course I came, I said. I didn't think you would, she said. After everything I said. Everything we did. I'm still your daughter, I said. I'm not going to abandon you. She squeezed my hand. I squeezed back. For a moment, we just sat there, holding on to each other, and I felt something shift inside me. The anger was still there, but it had been pushed aside by something else. Something softer. Something that still loved her despite everything. I read your letter, she said. You were right about everything. We used you. We lied to you. We put our own needs ahead of yours. It's done, I said. It's in the past. I don't want to lose you, she said. I know it's too late to fix everything. But I want you to know that I am sorry. I am so sorry. I didn't know what to say. I had waited my whole life to hear those words. I had dreamed of them, imagined them, rehearsed my response to them. But now that I was hearing them, they didn't feel as good as I thought they would. They felt hollow, insufficient. They couldn't undo the RS of neglect. They couldn't erase the debt or the lies or the broken promises. Mom, I am going to take legal steps to separate my name from the loans, I said. I don't want to hurt you. But I can't keep doing this. I understand, she said. I don't like it. But I understand. Dad walked into the room. He looked tired and old and broken. His shoulders were hunched, and his eyes were bloodshot. He walked to Mom's bedside and put his hand on her shoulder, a gesture that was meant to be comforting but looked more like he was holding himself up. We should talk, he said to me. All of us. I don't know if that's a good idea, I said. Please, Rachel said. She had stood up from the chair and was walking toward us. We need to figure this out. We can't keep fighting. I looked at each of them. I saw the pain in their eyes. I saw the regret. But I also saw the same pattern. The pattern of expecting me to fix everything. The pattern of wanting me to smooth things over, to make it all better, to absorb their mistakes so they didn't have to face the consequences. Okay, I said. Let's talk. We went to the hospital cafeteria. It was a cavernous room with plastic tables and vending machines and the faint smell of burned coffee. The four of us sat at a table in the corner, our cups of lukewarm coffee growing cold in front of us. Mark was the first to speak. I want to apologize, he said. I lied to you about the business. I took money I shouldn't have taken. I put you at risk. You did, I said. And I don't know if I can ever trust you again. I know, he said. But I am going to try to make it right. I got a job last week. A real job. I'm going to start paying you back. The truck, Dad said. I'm going to turn it in. I can't afford it. I never could. I'll help you find a cheaper car, I said. But I can't afford to pay for the lease anymore. We'll figure it out, Rachel said. We'll figure it out together. I looked at each of them again. I wanted to believe them. I wanted to believe that this time was different, that they had finally learned their lesson, that they would start taking responsibility for their own lives. But I had been burned too many times. I had heard too many promises that never materialized. I want to believe you, I said. But I need to see action. I need to see you all take responsibility for your choices. I can't keep being the one who smooths everything over. We know, Rachel said. We're not asking you to fix anything. We're asking you to be part of the solution. It's going to be difficult, I said. I'm going to have to work with a lawyer to untangle everything. It's going to cost money and time. But I am willing to do it if you are willing to meet me halfway. We are Dad said. We are We sat there for a long time, talking about the logistics. The house would be auctioned. There was no saving it. Dad would turn in the truck. Mark would start making payments on the loan, even if it took years. Rachel offered to help with the legal fees, a gesture that surprised me. I had never seen her offer to help with anything before. When we finally stood up to leave, Mom was waiting for us in her room. She was sitting up in bed, her face still pale but her eyes clear. She looked at me and reached out her hand. I love you, she said. I know I haven't always shown it. But I love you. I took her hand. I love you too, I said. But love isn't enough. We need to change. All of us. I know, she said. I'm going to try. I left the hospital that night with a strange feeling in my chest. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't closure. It was something in between. A cautious hope, maybe. A willingness to see what happened next. But I knew it was going to be a long road. And I knew I couldn't walk it alone. The weeks that followed were strange and unfamiliar. I had spent so many years bracing myself for the next crisis, the next call for help, the next demand on my time and money, that I didn't know what to do with the quiet. My phone still buzzed, but the messages were different now. Rachel sent a picture of a casserole she had made, something she had never done before. Mark texted to ask how my day was going, a question that had never crossed his mind in all the years I had been bailing him out. Mom called every few days, not to ask for anything, but just to talk. She told me about the books she was reading and the birds she was watching from her window and the physical therapy she was doing to strengthen her heart. I didn't know how to respond at first. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the requests that would reveal their true intentions. But it never came. They were just talking to me. Like I was a person they wanted to know, not a resource they wanted to use. It was unsettling. And it was also, slowly, strangely, healing. I continued working with Susan, my lawyer, to untangle the mess of loans and co-signatures. It was a slow process, full of paperwork and phone calls and meetings that left me exhausted. But I felt a sense of progress, a feeling that I was moving forward instead of treading water. The mortgage was a lost cause. The house was going to be auctioned, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. Dad turned in the truck and bought a used sedan with cash from his retirement account. Mark started making regular payments on the business loan, small amounts that barely made a dent in the principal, but at least they were something. The hardest part was letting go of the house. I had grown up in that split level with the brown siding and the crabapple tree. I had learned to ride my bike in that driveway. I had celebrated Christmases and birthdays and graduations in that living room. Letting it go felt like losing a part of myself, like cutting off a limb that had been gangrenous for years. But I knew it was necessary. The house was a symbol of everything that had gone wrong, a monument to bad decisions and broken promises. Mom took it the hardest. She had lived in that house for 30 years, and losing it felt like losing her identity. She called me one evening, her voice thick with tears, and told me she didn't know who she was without it. I listened. I didn't try to fix it. I just let her talk, and when she was done, I told her that she was more than a house. She was a mother and a grandmother and a woman who had survived more than she gave herself credit for. I didn't know if she believed me. But I knew I had to say it. I started going to therapy. It was something I had considered for years but never made time for. I found a counselor who specialized in family dynamics, a woman named Elena with a calm voice and a gentle smile. I told her everything. The loans. The lies. The birthday party that never happened. The hospital room where my mother apologized for the first time in her life. Elena listened without judgment, and she asked questions that made me think about things I had never considered. Have you ever asked yourself what you want? She asked one session. Not what they want. Not what you think you should want. What you actually want. I didn't have an answer. I had spent so long defining myself by what I could do for others that I had lost sight of myself entirely. I had been a daughter, a sister, a co-signer, a provider. But I had never been just me. That question stayed with me for days. I turned it over in my mind, examining it from every angle. What did I want? I wanted to feel valued. I wanted to feel seen. I wanted to wake up in the morning without dread in my stomach. I wanted to stop being defined by my family's chaos. And I wanted to forgive them. Not because they deserved it. Not because I had to. But because the anger was too heavy to carry anymore. It was a weight I had been dragging around for years, and I was tired of it. Rachel invited me to lunch one Saturday. It was the first time she had ever initiated a one-on-one outing with me. We met at a small cafe near her apartment, a place with mismatched chairs and chalkboard menus. She ordered a salad. I ordered a burger. We sat across from each other, and for a few minutes, we just ate in silence. Remember when we were kids? She finally said. We used to build forts in the living room with blankets and chairs. We would pretend we were explorers in a jungle. I smiled despite myself. I remember. You always wanted to be the leader. I always had to be the sidekick. I know, she said. I was awful to you. I didn't realize it then. I thought I was just being the older sister. You were always the older sister, I said. Even when you didn't have to be. I'm sorry, she said. For everything. For the lake. For the lies. For never being there when you needed me. I looked at her across the table. She looked different than I remembered. Softer. Less worried. There was something vulnerable in her eyes, something that hadn't been there before. Thank you, I said. It means a lot to hear you say that. I'm not going to make excuses, she said. I could tell you about how stressed I was, or how I felt like you had it easier because you didn't have kids, or how I was just trying to survive. But that's not the point. The point is that I hurt you. And I am sorry. I reached across the table and took her hand. It was the first time I had touched her with affection in years. We're going to be okay, I said. It's going to take time. But we're going to be okay. We talked for 2 hours that afternoon. We talked about our childhood and our parents and our regrets. We talked about the things we had never said to each other, the secrets we had kept, the resentments we had nursed. It wasn't easy. There were tears and awkward silences and moments when I wanted to walk away. But we stayed. We stayed and we talked and we stayed root to build something new. Mark called me a few days later. He had just received his first paycheck from his new job, and he wanted to transfer the money to my account. I told him to keep it. He needed it more than I did. He insisted. We argued for a few minutes, and finally, I told him to put it toward the loan. That was what mattered. That was the only thing that would make a difference. I'm proud of you, I said. For getting the job. For trying to make it right. I should have done it a long time ago, he said. I was so ashamed. I didn't want to admit that I had failed. So I just kept pretending. Pretending doesn't work, I said. I know. I pretended for years that everything was fine. Are we okay? He asked. You and me, I thought about it. I thought about all the lies and the money and the wasted years. I thought about the anger that had consumed me and the forgiveness that was slowly taking its place. We will be, I said. We're not there yet. But we will be. Dad was the hardest one to reach. He had always been a man of few words, more comfortable with tools and engines than with emotions. He called me one evening, his voice gruff and hesitant. I wanted to tell you something, he said. I know I wasn't a good father. I wasn't around enough. I didn't stand up for you when I should have. I let your mother handle everything, and she wasn't always fair to you. That's true, I said. But I know you did the best you could. I didn't, he said. I could have done better. I should have done better. And I am sorry. I didn't know what to say. My father had never apologized to me before. He had never admitted that he had made mistakes. I felt tears prick at my eyes. Thank you, I said. That means a lot. I'm going to try to be better, he said. I know it's late. But I'm going to try. Better late than never, I said. We talked for a few more minutes, about nothing important, about the weather and the news and his new sedan. And when we hung up, I felt something shift inside me. A door opening. A light coming in. Mom was still in recovery, still weak and fragile, but she was getting stronger every day. She called me often, and she never asked for anything. She just wanted to hear my voice. She told me about her therapy sessions and her new medication and her plans to plant a garden in the spring. She talked about the house as if it were already gone, as if she had made peace with the loss. One afternoon, she called and asked me to come over. She had moved into a small apartment in Rachel's house. It was a modest place, with beige walls and tired carpet, but she had made it her own. She had hung pictures on the walls and arranged her furniture in a way that felt comfortable and familiar. I sat on her new couch and looked around. It felt strange to see her in a place that wasn't the house I had grown up in. But she looked content. She looked at peace. I wanted to give you something, she said. She handed me a small box wrapped in brown paper. I opened it carefully, not knowing what to expect. Inside was a key. A simple brass key, old and tarnished. It's the key to the house, she said. I know it's going to be auctioned. But I wanted you to have it. I wanted you to know that it was always your home. I held the key in my hand. It was small and heavy and full of memories. I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know if I wanted it. But I understood what she was offering. She was offering me a piece of her past, a piece of herself. Thank you, I said. I'll keep it. We sat there for a long time, not saying anything. The silence wasn't heavy or suffocating. It was comfortable. It was the silence of two people who had been through a war and were finally ready to put down their weapons. I left her apartment that evening with the key in my pocket. I didn't know if I would ever use it. I didn't even know if I wanted to. But I knew that I would keep it. I would keep it as a reminder of where I had been and how far I had come. The journey wasn't over. There were still debts to pay and wounds to heal and trust to rebuild. But for the first time in my life, I felt like I was walking toward something instead of running away. I was walking toward a future that was mine. A future that I had chosen for myself. 6 months passed. The winter melted into spring, and the city came alive with color and light. I watched the trees outside my apartment window bud and bloom, their branches heavy with pink and white blossoms. The world was moving forward, and so was I. The house was auctioned on a cold Tuesday in March. I didn't go. I couldn't bear to see strangers walking through the rooms where I had grown up, touching the walls and opening the cabinets and deciding whether they wanted to make it their own. Mom called me that evening. She was crying, but it was a quiet cry, the kind that comes with acceptance rather than grief. She told me it was over, that the new owners were a young couple with a baby, and that they seemed nice. She said it almost like she was reassuring me, like she thought I needed to hear that the house was in good hands. I didn't know how to feel. I had spent so many years fighting to save that house, and now it was gone. But the fight was over. The house was gone, and so was the weight of it. The debt was still there, but it was being managed. Mark was making his payments, and Dad had sold the truck and bought something he could afford. Mom was living in her little apartment, and she had started volunteering at a local library, something she had always wanted to do but never made time for. I was still going to therapy. Elena and I had moved on from the family drama to the deeper questions, the ones about who I was and what I wanted. I had spent so long defining myself by my relationships with other people that I had never figured out who I was on my own. It was scary and liberating, like walking into a dark room and slowly realizing that I had the power to turn on the light. I started taking walks in the evenings. I would leave my apartment and walk through the city streets, past the coffee shops and the bookstores and the parks where children played and dogs chased balls. I would watch the people around me and imagine their lives, their joys and their sorrows, their triumphs and their failures. I was part of a world that was bigger than my family, and that felt like a revelation. One evening, I walked past a small art gallery. There was a painting in the window, a landscape of a lake at sunset. The water was pink and orange, and the trees were black silhouettes against the sky. I stood there for a long time, staring at it. It reminded me of the lake house I had rented for my birthday, the one where no one had come. But it didn't make me sad. It made me think about how far I had come, how much I had changed. I went inside and bought the painting. It wasn't expensive, just a small thing by a local artist. I hung it in my living room, above the couch. Every time I looked at it, I remembered that I had survived. I had survived the silence and the lies and the betrayal. I had survived the loneliness and the anger and the grief. And I had come out the other side, battered but whole. Mom invited me to dinner one Sunday. It was the first time she had ever hosted a meal at her new apartment. She had kept a roast chicken with potatoes and vegetables, and the table was set with her good china, the set she had used for holidays and special occasions. Rachel was there with her husband, a quiet man named Tom whom I really knew. Mark was there with his girlfriend, a woman named Lisa who had a kind smile and a gentle voice. Dad was there, sitting at the head of the table, looking older but more at peace than I had ever seen him. We sat around the table and ate. We talked about ordinary things. Rachel talked about her job, her promotion at the accounting firm where she worked. Mark talked about his job, the landscaping company that was rooting to gain traction now that he was actually doing the work. Dad talked about his new hobbies, woodworking and birdwatching. Mom talked about the library and the children she read to and the stories they loved. I listened to them, and I realized that something had shifted. We were talking to each other like real people, not like characters in a drama. There were no hidden agendas, no unspoken resentments, no passive-aggressive comments. We were just a family having dinner together. After the meal, Mom pulled me aside. She led me to her bedroom, a small room with a single bed and a dresser and a window that looked out onto the street. She opened the top drawer of the dresser and pulled out a small box. "I want you to have this," she said. She handed me the box. It was worn and faded, the velvet rubbed thin in places. I opened it carefully, and inside was a necklace. A silver chain with a small pendant, a heart with an inscription on the back. It was your grandmother's, Mom said. She gave it to me when I was about your age. I always meant to give it to you, but I never got around to it. I'm not sure why. I think I was waiting for the right moment. And then I kept waiting, and waiting, and waiting. I held the necklace in my hand. It was delicate and beautiful, and it felt heavy with meaning. Thank you, I said. I love it. I know I haven't always been a good mother, she said. I know I made mistakes. I know I hurt you. But I want you to know that I have always loved you. Even when I didn't show it. Even when I made the wrong choices. I have always loved you. I felt TRS prick at my eyes. I had heard her apologize before, in the hospital room, in her apartment, in the letters she had sent. But this felt different. This felt final. Like she was letting go of something, and in doing so, she was setting me free. I know, I said. I love you too. We hugged. It was a long hug, the kind that said more than words could. When we pulled apart, she was crying, and so was I. But they were good TRS. They were the TRS of healing. I wore the necklace home. I put it on as I walked out the door, and I didn't take it off for days. It felt like a talisman, a reminder of where I had come from and where I was going. The months continued to pass. Spring turned into summer, and the city grew hot and humid. I spent my weekends exploring, visiting museums and parks in neighborhoods I had never been to. I made new friends, people who knew me as I was now, not as I had been. I started dating again, tentatively, cautiously, but with an openness I hadn't felt in yet. I saw my family regularly. We had dinner together every few weeks, and the gatherings were increasingly comfortable. The awkwardness faded, replaced by something that felt like genuine connection. We still had disagreements. We still had moments of tension. But we had learned how to talk to each other, how to listen, how to apologize and forgive. One evening, I was sitting in my living room, looking at the painting of the lake, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Rachel. Remember when we used to build forts in the living room? I found the old photo album. Come over and look at it with me. I smiled. I typed back, on my way. I drove to Rachel's house. She lived in a suburban neighborhood with tree-lined streets and well-kept lawns. Her house was a modest ranch, but it was warm and inviting, full of the noise and chaos of a family with young children. I walked in, and she was sitting on the couch with the photo album open on her lap. We spent the evening looking at pictures. Pictures of us as children, in the backyard of the house that was now gone. Pictures of our parents, younger and happier. Pictures of holidays and birthdays and ordinary days that had become extraordinary in hindsight. I'm glad we're doing this, Rachel said. I'm glad we're talking again. Me too, I said. I missed this. I missed you. I missed you too, she said. I just didn't know how to say it. We stayed up late, talking and laughing and crying. We talked about our childhood, the good and the bad. We talked about our parents, their flaws and their strengths. We talked about the future, the things we wanted and the things we feared. When I finally left, it was past midnight. The stars were out, and the air was still and still. I walked to my car, and I felt a sense of peace that I had never known before. The journey had been long and hard, but I had made it. I had survived. I thought about my birthday, the one that had started all of this. The lake house. The empty chairs. The cake I had eaten alone. It felt like a lifetime ago, like something that had happened to a different person. That person had been lost and hurt and angry. This person was found and healing and freed. I knew the journey wasn't over. There would be more challenges, more setbacks, more moments of doubt. But I knew I could handle them. I had the tools and the strength and the support I needed. As I drove home, I passed the lake house. It was on the way, a detour I hadn't planned but didn't avoid. The lights were on, and there were cars in the driveway. A family was inside, laughing and talking and making memories. I smiled. It wasn't my place anymore. It was theirs. And that was okay. I drove home and went to bed. I slept soundly, without dreams. And when I woke up the next morning, I felt ready for whatever came next. I felt ready for my life.